Hello, welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's get started with the headlines this hour. The Pentagon is pushing back after a leaked U.S. intelligence report claimed Trump strikes on Iran failed. Defense Secretary Hegseth called the report incomplete, while General Caine praised U.S. troops who defended a key base in Qatar during Iran's missile retaliation. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has broken his silence since the Israel ceasefire, claiming the U.S. gained nothing and warning of future strikes. He said Iran dealt a major blow to both Israel and America and praised Iranian forces for breaching Israel's defenses. CIA Director John Ratcliffe has said the United States strikes severely damaged Iran's nuclear sites and set the program back years. His statement clashes with a leaked Pentagon report that downplayed the damage, a report that infuriated President Trump. NATO leaders agreed to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP, delivering on a core demand from US President Trump. Allies also reaffirmed their mutual defense pledge as Trump slams Spain, and Macron links the move to trade tensions. Torrential rains in China's Guizhou province have triggered massive floods, killing 6 and forcing over 80,000 to evacuate. State media reports suggest. CCTV says low-lying areas face major damage with traffic cut off, communications down and rescue operations still underway. State-backed vigilance in northwest Nigeria killed over 100 armed gang members in a clash with notorious bandit leader Bello Turji's forces. Zamfara official Ahmed Manga says the hours-long battle was led by a civilian protection guard in a major security operation. Thailand's Prime Minister and Cambodia's ex-leader tour border areas amidst growing tensions in a deadly clash last month. The visits come as Bangkok faces political turmoil and cracks down on cross-border crime near disputed territory. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez touched down in Venice for a 3-day celebration dubbed the Wedding of the Century. The lavish festivities set to cost up to $56 million. Drew 90 private jets and sparked local protests over excess. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan Caine have held a Pentagon news conference to respond to an early leaked intelligence report claiming that Trump's strikes in Iran had failed and likely only put the country back mere months. This comes after the United States President Donald Trump insisted that the U.S. strikes delivered a devastating attack, and that questioning his assessment of the strike was not only unpatriotic but also made the pilots who dropped the bombs very upset. Secretary Hegseth dismissed the significance of the report, calling it a partial view that had not yet been reviewed by the full intelligence community. He criticized the media for what he described as overly dramatic coverage and emphasized that other intelligence evaluations were more optimistic regarding the damage inflicted on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. General Caine shifted focus to Iran's retaliatory strike on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. He highlighted the efforts of 44 American service members stationed there during what he described as the largest single Patriot missile engagement in U.S. history. According to Caine, U.S. forces alongside Qatari military units successfully defended the base from incoming Iranian missiles. Here's what the Defense Secretary had to say.
Fake news, CNN, MSNBC, or the New York Times, there's been fawning coverage of a preliminary assessment. I've had a chance to read it. Every outlet has breathlessly reported on a preliminary assessment from DIA. I'm looking at it right now. Again, it was preliminary, a day and a half after the actual strike, when it admits itself in writing that it requires weeks to accumulate the necessary data to make such an assessment. It's preliminary. It points out that it's not been coordinated with the intelligence community at all. There's low confidence in this particular report. It says in the report there are gaps in the information. It says in the report multiple linchpin assumptions are what this assessment a linchpin assumption. You know what that is? That means your entire premise is predicated on a linchpin. If you're wrong, everything else is wrong. And yet, and still, this report acknowledges it's likely severe damage. Again, this is preliminary, but leaked because someone had an agenda to try to muddy the waters and make it look like this historic strike wasn't successful. I'm going to get to the chairman in a moment because he's going to lay out the particulars for you based on his professional military experience. But here's what other folks.
Ross Feingold, political analyst, is joining us live from Taipei. Ross, thank you for being with us today on NewsX World. What do you make of the press conference addressed by the Defense Secretary of the U.S. and General Caine? What do you make about what they said on this leaked intelligence report, as well as their assessment of the impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran?
Well, I watched the press conference that began a little over an hour ago at 8 a.m. Washington, D.C. time on Thursday morning. And I thought both the Secretary of Defense as well as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff were very forceful. They were very articulate. And I thought within the boundaries of not revealing any classified information, which of course they cannot do, they were very transparent. And I think this is going to do a lot of help to the Trump administration to make their argument that they've done severe damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, they didn't claim during the press conference that they've completely eliminated the risk that Iran could reconstitute its nuclear weapons research and development program. But they were certainly articulate, again, within the confines of not revealing any classified information about the severe damage. They the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff spoke in great detail about the damage that this type of bomb could do. He spoke in great detail about the preparation and the testing that has gone into this type of ordinance. And I think this is going to go, again, this is going to go a long way to really putting the onus back on Iran, pushing it back to Iran to say that they still have a viable program.
Right. Also, Ross, as far as, of course, now, these contradictions on the impact done by these U.S. strikes, do you believe it's pretty embarrassing for the U.S. President, which is why he's very infuriated that this leak, in a way, did happen in the first place? Of course, they've called it a very narrow view and a preliminary assessment. But obviously, this leak is very embarrassing, isn't it, for the U.S. leadership, which has just come out of this war?
Well, no administration, doesn't matter who's the president, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, no administration likes there to be leaks that go against the narrative that the administration wants to put out. And clearly that happened in this case, that President Trump said that the nuclear facility at Fordow was obliterated. And then there was a very preliminary assessment that seemed to reach a different conclusion. But again, the key word, and Secretary Hegseth talked about that in the press conference just now, the key word is that was a preliminary assessment. And it's still early days for the intelligence community, which has a number of different organizations, that they all have to make their own assessments, which will be issued in the coming days and weeks. But again, I think this press conference went a long way to explaining to not just the American people, but the world, that there was severe damage to Iran's nuclear facilities.
What's your assessment, Ross, through your readings and through speaking with various people? What has been the impact of the U.S. strikes?
It's still an open question about what capabilities Iran has retained. But I think we should be absolutely clear about one thing. If Iran still has the ability to research and develop nuclear weapons, there will be subsequent action, whether that's from the United States or from Israel, whether that's targeting facilities, or in the case of Israel, it's been very successful in targeting the nuclear scientists. So if Iran still has this capability, and if they want to continue to develop nuclear weapons, they should be prepared for follow-up action by the United States and or Israel, which brings us back to a very key point, and I think it's something that frustrates President Trump, because President Trump feels like he gave a very reasonable offer to Iran, which is this: if Iran wants to have a civilian nuclear power program, we could organize an international consortium which would enrich uranium outside Iran and ship it to Iran for use in civilian nuclear power. So again, this puts this onus back onto Iran's leadership. Where do they want to go from here? And that's something that they have to decide.
Absolutely. Also, I have to, of course, ask you, Ross, about the IAEA's assessment as well. We've heard statements from Rossi of the IAEA as well, saying that it does seem that there has been considerable damage to Iran's nuclear enrichment program.
Yeah, certainly. Rossi has to remain neutral. He's not meant to be a partisan player or take sides in the international disputes over Iran's nuclear program. But he's just telling the truth that it's clear there's been severe damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. Nobody is doubting that. I mean, I think the doubts are whether or not President Trump's use of the word obliterated is an accurate term to describe what's transpired. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. I think we have to wait for further assessments. But what the IAEA wants most of all is the same thing that the United States or Israel want, and that is that Iran doesn't hide a secret nuclear weapons development program. And if Iran is serious about using nuclear energy for civilian purposes only, that it reaches a deal with the United States as well as the other parties to the original JCPOA.
All right, Ross Feingold, thank you for joining us with your perspective on that story. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has made his first public video statement since the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, declaring that the United States gained nothing from its involvement in the 12-day conflict. Speaking on Iranian state television, Khamenei claimed that Washington entered the war directly, fearing that its inaction would result in the collapse of Israel. He also maintained that Iran had dealt a significant blow to American interests and described the outcome as a victory for the Islamic Republic. Khamenei also addressed Iran's retaliatory missile strike on Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military facility in the Middle East. While the U.S. reported no casualties and described the damage as minimal, Khamenei insisted the attack caused significant damage and accused U.S. President Trump of downplaying the incident. Khamenei also warned that more attacks on U.S. bases in the region could occur if Iran is attacked again. He also said Iran has access to key U.S. military targets and would respond decisively if provoked. On Israel, Khamenei claimed the Israeli regime almost collapsed during Iran's retaliatory strikes and described the outcome as a victory for the Islamic Republic. Separately, on social media platform X, Khamenei congratulated Iran's armed forces for what he called a breakthrough of Israel's layered defense systems. He also added that both military and urban targets were hit and called the Israeli government a fallacious Zionist regime. Let's in fact listen in to his statement.
رئیس جمهور آمریکا در شرح اونچه که واقع شده بود بزرگ نمایی غیر متعارفی کرد. معلوم شد که به این بزرگ نمایی احتیاج داره. هر کسی میشنید اون حرفها رو میفهمید که در زیر ظاهر این حرفها یک حقیقت دیگری وجود داره. کاری نتوانستن انجام بدن. به مقصودی که داشتن نتوانستن برسن. جمهوری اسلامی سیلی سختی به گونه آمریکا نواخت. به یکی از پایگاه‌های مهم آمریکا در منطقه، پایگاه العدید، حمله کرد و خسارات همون کسانی که در اون قضیه بزرگ نمایی کرده بودن در این قضیه سعی کردن کوچک نمایی کنن، بگن هیچ اتفاقی نیفتاده، در حالی که اتفاق بزرگی افتاده بود. به مراکز هسته‌ای ما حمله کردن که البته این در خور پیگیری جزایی در دادگاه‌های بین‌المللی است به طور مستقل، اما نتوانستن کار مهمی انجام بدن و این اهانت بزرگ.
Adrian Calamel, terror scholar, is joining us live from New York. Adrian, what do you make of this latest statement by the Iran supreme leader, his first video message since the ceasefire between the two countries, Iran and Israel?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, he sounds exhausted. That's just my first takeaway on that. Now, as far as his message goes, if this is victory, I would hate to see what defeat looks like for him. And defeat for him is complete collapse and loss of the regime. So he's putting out these statements, obviously, to bolster up and boost up his proxies, who have largely been quiet during this entire operation, and for internal consumption for the people, the Iranians that actually believe him and follow him, and that's a small percentage. But it's for those individuals to tell them that, this has been a great success, that, there's nothing to see here. Yeah, they may have hit this, but the damage is minimal. And, and this is typical of Caine. He's going to try and project strength and threats about targeting U.S. bases, and we know where U.S. installations are, and we have people to target them. Well, yeah, that may be the case, but if you try something like that, the response from the Americans is going to be something that Caine does not want. He already saw this at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan.
Yes, absolutely. Also, Adrian, as you're saying, it seems that he's merely playing to his domestic audience because of these comments. And you, of course, are saying that it's rather funny that he's claiming victory, although the wider world community believes that they have suffered defeat. But coming back to some of the other points made by Caine in this address, Adrian, there's also a veiled warning to the United States of America. What do you make of his messaging to the US in particular, saying that they gain nothing through their involvement in the conflict, also saying that the damage to their bases was far greater than being claimed, and also saying that they will strike the US in the future too, if necessary?
Well, yeah, the strike on Al-Udeid base in Qatar. Now, I think we really need to unpack that entire situation. We have to look at Qatar's relationship with the Islamic Republic, and that relationship is pretty close, especially when you look at the South Pars natural gas field, which basically accounts for 70% of Qatar's GDP. So the last thing Qatar wanted to see was the Islamic Republic to fall. That creates instability, and that possibly cut off their access to what floats their economy. So this entire operation, it was orchestrated between the Islamic Republic and Qatar to hit that U.S. base. And the only reason the United States has a base in Qatar is because Ali Khamenei says you can have it there. He tells Qatar, yeah, let them put it there so we can watch them. And in like a scenario like this, dire straits, we can coordinate a type of attack on the U.S. base. Now, the U.S. had already expected this and pulled pulled a lot of people out of there and put some force protection measures in place. So we knew this was coming, but it comes, one of the largest concerns is that we continue to work through Qatar as an intermediary to help regulate the Islamic Republic's behavior. And
right.
the fact is Qatar works kind of hand in glove with the Islamic Republic on multiple issues.
Okay, that's a lesson for the future, is what you're saying. Now, coming back to the main goal of Israel and the US in this conflict, has Khamenei weighed in at all on what their nuclear capability currently is and the damage to those facilities?
Has Khamenei commented on the damage to them?
Yes. Has he?
He's going to minimize the damage. But realistically, if we look at this, obliterated, these terms that were used, they're inaccurate. It set it back. It set back the nuclear program. It set it back at least 2 years from most of the assessments that I've seen that I trust and that are accurate.
No, but interestingly, what I was trying to ask you is that Khamenei has not really commented on that publicly in this address. He's not really spoken on the nuclear capabilities or those particular strikes and their damage, has he?
No, and the reason why, and I believe the reason why, is that this, if he comments on this and the damage on this and is somewhat transparent, which I doubt it, but in any event, when he does, I think that creates a problem for him with the population. The people in Iran, the Iranians, have seen trillions and trillions of dollars thrown into Fordo, into Natanz. And if they find out that those are all, I mean, they question those to begin with. They're not happy with it. And then they'll find out that they're completely destroyed, that all their money's been stolen for those projects. It's going to upset the population. So I would suspect that's one of the reasons why he's saying no, and that's why he's also claiming that, we won here. We still have a nuclear program. It's going to take longer to reconstitute it, but we won. And being deliberately vague on the on the Fordo and the Natanz sites.
All right, Adrian Calamel, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. Now, leaders of the 27 European Union countries are meeting in Brussels today for their final summit of the current term. The discussions would include topics like defense, trade with the United States, support for Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East. Security and defense are a major focus following the recent NATO summit. EU leaders are discussing how to strengthen the bloc's defense capabilities and prepare for future threats, including cyber attacks and hybrid warfare. Trade is also high on the agenda. EU leaders are deciding whether to accept a quick trade deal with the United States, even if it favors Washington, or push for better terms. The US currently has tariffs of up to 50% on some EU goods. President Trump has set a July 9th deadline for a deal, warning that tariffs could increase further if no agreement is reached. The EU is also considering its own response, which could include new tariffs on American products or a digital tax targeting large US tech companies. Support for Ukraine remains a priority as well. President Vladimir Zelensky is joining the summit by video to discuss continued military and political support for Ukraine amidst its war with Russia. Leaders are also debating a new round of sanctions against Russia, though some countries have raised concerns about energy supplies. Now, in the Middle East, EU leaders will talk about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, regional tensions, and efforts to restart talks with Iran on its nuclear program. Other topics include migration, border control, and the EU's long-term competitiveness. The summit will end with a joint statement outlining the bloc's priorities for the months ahead. Well, let's in fact listen in to what some leaders had to say on the sidelines of this summit.
If we would integrate Ukraine into the European Union, we would integrate the war. And we would not like to be together in one community with a country who is in war and represent an imminent danger on us. Because if a member of the European Union is in war, it means that the European Union is war, and we don't like it.
Hoy hay muchos temas en el Consejo Europeo, pero sí quisiera, por ser breve, centrarme en uno, que es el informe que se elevó a los ministros y ministras de Asuntos Exteriores por parte del relator de Derechos Humanos sobre la situación catastrófica de genocidio que se está viviendo en Gaza.
Israel has temporarily halted aid deliveries to Gaza amidst concerns that supplies intended for civilians may be seized by Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have announced that the military has been ordered to develop a plan within 2 days to prevent such diversions. This decision follows videos of masked men on aid trucks in northern Gaza, raising concerns over aid control. However, influential Gazan clan leaders have denied any involvement of Hamas in diverting aid, stating that these trucks were guarded solely through tribal efforts to protect the supplies. Hamas also denies any role in seizing aid. Clans, including Hamas rivals, have helped secure aid during severe shortages after nearly 2 years of conflict. The ongoing war has resulted in devastating casualties and continues to exacerbate humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Reports indicate that dozens of Palestinians were recently killed near aid distribution points, underscoring the fragile and dangerous environment for civilians and aid workers alike. Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu has reaffirmed his commitment to working closely with the United States President Donald Trump to defeat their common enemies, secure the release of hostages, and expand peace efforts in the region. Netanyahu shared a photo of himself and President Trump holding hands, signaling their strong alliance shortly after Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei delivered his first speech following a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. President Trump also publicly praised Netanyahu's leadership, calling him one of Israel's greatest warriors and highlighting their joint efforts to neutralize a significant nuclear threat from Iran. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has asked a Jerusalem court to postpone his testimony in his long-running corruption trial. His lawyer said the request was made due to what he called urgent national, diplomatic and security matters, including the recent conflict with Iran and ongoing fighting in Gaza. In the official court filing, Netanyahu's legal team argued that the PM must now focus all his attention on managing Israel's current security situation. He was due to testify in the next 2 weeks. The request comes just a day after US President Donald Trump publicly called for the case to be cancelled altogether. Writing on his Truth Social platform, Trump described the trial as a witch hunt and said Netanyahu should be pardoned, calling him a great hero. The comment sparked criticism in Israel. Opposition leader Yair Lapid has warned Trump not to interfere in internal matters. He said that while Israel values its relationship with the US, legal proceedings in an independent country should not be influenced by outside voices. Other political figures have also weighed in. Far-right lawmakers in Netanyahu's coalition echoed Trump's position, calling the trial unfair and politically driven. But even some of them warned against US interference, saying legal matters must remain under Israeli jurisdiction. The trial, which began in 2020, has been repeatedly delayed. Netanyahu denies all charges, including allegations that he and his wife accepted luxury gifts in return for political favors and that he tried to secure better media coverage in exchange for regulatory benefits. And that's all we have time for today on this edition of World Report. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world right here. Stay tuned.